If there's one thing that we learned about Zion Williamson's injury, it's that there's no one player in the NBA that's a more vital piece of their team than Zion Williamson. 8 weeks ago, the New Orleans Pelicans officially released a statement saying that Zion had a torn meniscus and that he would need to undergo knee surgery in order to repair it. And now it's been 8 weeks later after the Pelicans announced that he'd be out for 6 to 8 weeks. And we still don't really have an idea of when Zion's going to get on the floor. In addition to this, the New Orleans Pelicans are officially in the cellar of the NBA, in the Western Conference, which seems to be way more shallow and hollow than it has ever been. So why aren't the Pelicans beginning to make moves? Why isn't there a fire sale? Why isn't JJ Redick, Derek Favors being traded to a team that could potentially use them in order to retool for a championship run? So in this video, what we're going to be discussing today is the current state of the New Orleans Pelicans, who they are potentially going to trade, why they haven't traded anyone yet, and Zion Williamson's injury and where he is with his rehabilitation. But before we get to all that, guys, if you watch a lot of my content and you see it get recommended to you and you aren't subscribed yet, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel. And if you are subscribed and you just see yourself here often, take a moment to turn on my notifications, because bro, there's nobody that'll work harder for you guys than me. I am currently extremely sick. That's why my voice sounds a little weird. So if you guys could build towards my dream of being a YouTuber with 500,000 subscribers so I could go full-time on YouTube, that would mean the world to me. Now, on top of that, I've been coming under some difficult times with copyright claims from YouTube. A bunch of other NBA YouTubers have as well, so I kind of made a backup plan. If anything was to happen to my YouTube channel, I'm going to start uploading my content to Instagram TV. So I'm going to leave a link to that in the description down below, next to my Discord chat, if you guys ever want to talk to me directly. And let's get to this video here real quick, guys, because at the current moment of this video, the New Orleans Pelicans have lost a franchise record 12 straight games. Only the Golden State Warriors have a lower winning percentage, and only the Washington Wizards have a worse defensive rating. Brandon Ingram is the lone bright spot on this team, but I'll tell you something that I was saying even before this season. Brandon Ingram needs the ball in his hands in order to make a difference. He's not very good at playing off of the ball, so once Zion comes back, there may be an issue over there. But regardless, it's very nice to see Brandon Ingram blossoming into a max contract worthy player, as his teammate so far, Lonzo Ball, hasn't really had the same pleasure, as Lonzo Ball has been relegated to bench duty. But I don't really think that's a bad thing. I think that's more a testament to Lonzo just needs more time to be developed, and the Pelicans are doing an excellent job developing him. They've already remade his shot, and it's going to take some time for that brand new retooled jump shot to consistently fall. But I think Lonzo has the work ethic, and I think he's in a system to thrive. And one would wonder, why haven't the Pelicans traded Lonzo yet? Well, every player that is a potential trade piece for the Pelicans, there's either a reason to trade him and not to trade him. In Lonzo's case, it doesn't really make sense to trade a player whose stock is at an all-time low, who is averaging the same amount of points per game as he did as a rookie, and who has been stagnating ever since he has come to the NBA. It makes more sense to keep him on your roster for one more year before he hits restricted free agency and try to develop him into what he could be. But that's not necessarily the case with every single team. In fact, if you are the worst team in the NBA, why wouldn't you have a fire sale? Well, you have to also think that the Pelicans, despite being the last place team in the West, they're actually not too far from being 8th place in the playoffs. As at the time of this video, the Pelicans are currently 6 games back behind the 12 and 14 Thunder and the 12 and 14 Sacramento Kings for the final 2 playoff spots in the West. We're only about 30% the way through the NBA season, and it doesn't really make sense to blow everything up when your prime player, your best player, hasn't even had an opportunity to see the floor yet. So the reason why the Pelicans are not doing anything is because, call them crazy and let me know in the comment section if you agree with them, they do not want to tank and give up on the season because they think they can make it into the playoffs. Now, the likelihood of this happening is extremely low, but the fact that Zion's about to return is enough reason to not completely sell everybody on the team. As a matter of fact, David Griffin has gone on record to say that he does not want this team to tank, and culturally, he always wanted to raise a team with a family type of vibe. He wanted to add a cocoon, quote unquote, around young players to nourish their development so they can grow in an environment where winning matters, with types of human beings that he would want them to model. And that's where Jrue Holiday, JJ Redick, and Derek Favors come in. They were supposed to be the role model type players that these players try to model their games after. Now, with that being said, what could potentially happen to the New Orleans Pelicans? Well, I do really appreciate the fact that David Griffin doesn't want to punt on the season so quickly. It's actually very nice for Pelicans fans because I actually thought that this team was going to be a sleeper playoff team coming into the season. But the fact that David Griffin doesn't want to punt on this season just tells me that he cares way more about the team's culture than the ability to tank to get a few percentage points higher at the #1 overall pick in this year's NBA draft. Now, don't get me wrong, I am going to be rooting as hard as anyone else that's watching this video for the New Orleans Pelicans to draft LaMelo Ball if they do get into the draft lottery. I think a team with LaMelo, Lonzo, and Zion Williamson would just be very good for ratings. It would really make the Pelicans one of the most nationally talked about NBA teams, irregardless of talent. But there's one more variable that I want to talk to you guys about, and that's the apparent trade rumors. But before we even get to that, we need to discuss the current players that the Pelicans are willing to trade and the players that the Pelicans are not as willing to trade. And which is really shocking to me because the first player that they're willing to trade is a player that David Griffin even went as far as to call his MVP candidate. They're willing to move on from Jrue Holiday.
Yeah, you said you asked him, do you want to be the MVP? Do you think that's something he's capable of being?
I do, and nobody thought Steve Nash was, and he was two-time MVP, and people would have thought we were insane for even uttering that notion. Players in this league are so gifted. When you're as good as Jrue Holiday is, what makes you take the next step is just your vision of self. And sometimes you need to be given permission to dominate people. And in his situation with Anthony around, I think he was always sort of waiting as though it was Anthony's job. And now Jrue knows it's his job, and he's ready to do
Holiday. And I honestly can't blame them because Jrue Holiday has a max contract and they need to find a way to pay players like Brandon Ingram. I know they have cap space to sign Brandon Ingram to an extension, but the timeline of Jrue Holiday's max contract and his prime doesn't align with the time with Zion Williamson, Lonzo Ball's, and Brandon Ingram's timeline. So it does make sense for the Pelicans to move on from Jrue Holiday if he doesn't really mesh with this young Pelicans core. Another player that they're willing to move on from is JJ Redick, and I believe that's mainly because they're not getting the return that they want from him. Of course, JJ Redick is an incredible shooter, one of the best shooters of our generation that doesn't get talked about enough in a generation that includes players like Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. And shooting is a premium position in the NBA. So without a doubt, the Pelicans could move JJ Redick to any contending team that could be in use of some outside perimeter shooting that is trying to make a playoff run. But what about Zion? Where is Zion currently? And should the Pelicans trade these players? Well, it depends on Zion. And currently, at the time I'm making this video, the Pelicans did drop a video on how Zion's rehabilitation is going. And it showed Zion just shooting a couple of shots. I'm going to put it in front of you guys here so you guys can enjoy. And he looks to be more or less healthy. It's just this isn't really much for a Pelicans fan to say, oh, he's looking good. He's just shooting jump shots. Even Kevin Durant is shooting jump shots right now. I definitely think it's some sort of media marketing ploy just so everyone could say, okay, Zion is making his way back. But I honestly don't think it's much progress at all. Any player could literally just post a video of them shooting and they'll look okay and not injured. If Kevin Durant could do it with a repaired Achilles despite being out for the rest of the year, I'm pretty sure Zion could do it with a repaired meniscus. But that is my opinion on the matter. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think the New Orleans Pelicans should make these trades and completely retool the roster? Or do you think they should place a greater emphasis on the culture that the team has and just try to finish with the best spot they can? Do you think they should trade some players before Zion Williamson comes back? Or do you think they should keep the roster as is and just try to make that playoff run.